My husband fell in love with the new intern at his company. There was no affair. No secret messages. No other woman, at least, not officially. He handed over everything to me at the house, the car, the savings, and walked away with nothing but a divorce decree. Annabelle, he said, I can't betray Chloe. And I don't want to betray you either. I looked at the man who once shared instant noodles with me in a cramped studio apartment, the man who had promised we'd spend our lives together. I wiped the corner of my eye and answered softly, okay. Chapter 1. When Jason heard my response, he froze, clearly not expecting me to agree so easily. He'd thought I would at least cry, argue, cling to him, anything but this. After all, he'd been ready for a drawn-out battle. Lawsuits, cold wars, whatever it took. He had the determination for it. That was Jason. When he wanted something, he went all in, no matter the cost. Just like back when he wanted me, he'd gotten into fights for me, pulled me out of that suffocating home I grew up in. If anyone wants to mess with Annabelle, he'd said back then, they go through me first. A beer bottle had shattered against his head, glass scattering across the floor. The ferocity in his eyes made the guys back off, one by one, until they finally let me go. They'd only wanted me to pay off my father's gambling debts, not actually kill anyone. I'd cried as I pressed my hands over Jason's wound, heart aching, while he still managed to grin and pull me into his arms. Annabelle, he said proudly, I told you, I like you. And as long as I do, no one's ever going to hurt you. And now, he didn't like me anymore. Now, he liked the new intern. Chapter 2. Jason opened his mouth, guilt finally surfacing in his eyes. Annabelle. I know I've wronged you. But I love Chloe. I can't let you carry the stigma of being the other woman. I want to be with her openly, the right way. He sounded so straightforward, so sincere. Even pushing 30, he still carried that same reckless idealism from his youth. How noble. Who wouldn't admire a love like that? I just have one question, I said. I wiped my eyes, lifted my head, and repeated with a faint smile, just one. Did Chloe only find out today that you weren't single? At first, he used to complain about the new assistant, said she was clumsy, timid, jumpy as a stray cat, that she wasn't competent. Later, he got annoyed while pointing at the Valentine's gift she'd picked out for me. Who gives a giant stuffed animal for Valentine's Day? Seriously, what was Chloe thinking? The assistant he was criticizing just blinked those wide, innocent eyes and murmured, but I thought it was cute. Jason had laughed it off, but I saw it, a brief flash of helpless fondness in his eyes. By the end, he was saying Chloe truly cared about him. That a sweet, simple girl like her deserved the very best. Naturally, he should return to being a free man and stand beside her openly, in the light of day. He said he couldn't let someone as innocent as Chloe be labeled a homewrecker. So when their relationship started growing closer, she didn't know he was married? At my question, Jason's expression went blank for a second. He looked away. Annabelle, we just couldn't help it. But I swear to you, he added quickly, nothing inappropriate happened before this. We never crossed a line. We have nothing to feel guilty about. He was right. Laughing together at the office wasn't cheating. Driving his assistant home when she stayed late wasn't cheating. Standing up for her when she cried wasn't cheating. I let out a faint, bitter smile and nodded. Fine. We'll get divorced. Chapter 3. After all, Jason had walked away from everything. The house, the car, the savings, he'd signed it all over to me and left with nothing, just to secure that divorce decree. What was there for me to be dissatisfied about? Jason finally exhaled, relief flooding his face. He looked at me almost gratefully. Annabelle, I knew you'd understand. I knew you'd let us be together. Of course he knew. From 18 to 28, my entire adult life had been spent by his side. We'd known each other for a year. Dated for 4. And married for 5. I've always had a mild temperament. I don't cling. I don't make scenes. I was even more so when I was younger. At the beginning, Jason used to complain that I didn't really love him. Otherwise, he'd argue, why don't you ever get jealous? He once disappeared for 3 days just to see how I'd react. 3 days later, he came back, jaw tight, almost frustrated with himself. Annabelle, you win, he'd muttered through gritted teeth. I really like you. Even if you act like you don't care, I'll still stick around. The moment he said that, I threw myself into his arms. What he never knew was that during those 3 days, I'd gone everywhere looking for him. I had been one step away from falling apart. When I finally held him, I whispered, still shaken, "You promised. Don't leave. I'm scared." He stiffened, then pulled me tighter, his grin wide and triumphant, like he'd just won a war. "I thought you really didn't care," he said. "You're like a cat. Impossible to read." Chapter 4. After that, we got into the same university. We graduated and moved into a tiny apartment, living off cheap takeout and boxed ramen while we tried to build something of our own. When the company was just starting out, we hustled nonstop, chasing clients, barely sleeping. Eventually things stabilized. He proposed. We signed the papers. The wedding was extravagant, far beyond what we'd once imagined, because he said, "I love Annabelle. Annabelle deserves the best." And now, with everything settled, he stood there holding our divorce papers and said, "Annabelle, don't blame me. Chloe deserves the best." The intern was waiting for him not far away. She looked soft, delicate. When she saw me, she shrank slightly, as if I were the one intimidating her. Jason noticed and instinctively slipped an arm around her shoulders. "Chloe's sensitive," he said. "If you're upset, take it out on me. Don't scare her." Chloe blushed and gave me an apologetic little smile. "Ms. Carter, please don't take it the wrong way. He just has a bad temper sometimes. He doesn't mean anything by it." Her tone was so familiar, so intimate, that anyone listening might have thought she was the one who had spent 10 years with Jason. And that I was the outsider. In truth, I was. I watched the scene in front of me, their closeness, his protectiveness, and whatever sharp ache had once lived in my chest had already dulled into numbness. I lifted the divorce papers slightly and smiled. "It's fine," I said calmly. "We won't be in each other's lives anymore anyway." For some reason, Jason frowned, as if hesitating. "Annabelle, even after the divorce, we can still be friends. If you ever need anything, you can come to me." The smile at the corner of Chloe's lips stiffened. I didn't react much. I just shook my head. That won't be necessary. I wouldn't have any need for him. And even if I did, he wouldn't be able to help. After all, he'd walked away with nothing, no money, no power. There was nothing he could offer anymore. Besides, I don't make a habit of contacting married men. The sentence changed both of their expressions instantly. As if on guard, Chloe hurried to steer the conversation elsewhere. She had already taken the front passenger seat that used to be mine and turned to me with a polite smile. "Ms. Carter, where are you headed? I can have Jason drop you off. My ex-husband, his new woman, and the car we used to share." The whole scene felt absurdly theatrical. I declined, holding back tears, then got into my own car and drove straight to the hospital. The doctor I'd scheduled was already waiting for me. He handed over a new report. "Ms. Carter," he said gently, "your pregnancy is progressing very well. Everything looks stable." Chapter 5. Jason hadn't just left me the house and the car. He'd left me with a child. But he would never know. Chapter 6. After the divorce, I followed the plan I'd already set in motion and relocated the company's operations to another city. Everyone knew the story, how Jason had built his business from nothing, only to give it all up for a woman. The company he'd spent years fighting for was handed over just like that. His marriage, too, ended without hesitation. The day he and Chloe got married, it was a spectacle. The ceremony was live-streamed online and even featured on a few large outdoor screens downtown. He might have walked away from his assets, but the connections he'd built over the years were still there. Many of the guests were people we both knew. Which meant I received photos in real time. A mutual friend messaged me, clearly upset. 10 years together, and you've been divorced less than 6 months. He didn't even try to spare you the humiliation, just remarried like that and turned it into a public event. Isn't this basically him trying to embarrass you? And now people online are saying Chloe is his true love, that you were just the person he settled for back then. There was a pause, then a cold scoff. What a load of crap. No one understood better than they did how Jason and I had struggled side by side, how we'd supported each other through the hardest years. The hardships Jason endured, I bore my share too. We were partners who had survived everything together. How could anyone call that us settling? Still, one thing was true. With a live stream like that, of course the internet was watching. The comments were lively. Straight out of a romance novel. The guy gave up everything just to leave the clingy ex and marry his true love. So sweet. Feels like I'm just an NPC watching their love story unfold. Bet that bitter old wife saw this and cried her eyes out in some bathroom somewhere. Serves her right. If it weren't for her, Chloe wouldn't have been heartbroken so many times. That was when I found out Chloe had been documenting her daily life with Jason online all along, in places no one around us ever saw. She'd built a following as a relationship blogger, and plenty of people were invested in their story. Comments flooded in. Her posts read like a romance novel, the sweet, innocent girl meeting the powerful CEO. Can the evil ex just disappear already? She's ruining a perfectly good love story. If she won't step aside, she deserves whatever happens to her. As it happened, my entire family was already gone. My mother died giving birth to me. My gambling-addicted father got himself into too much trouble and was found dead in a dump 3 years ago. I'd cremated him myself. There was no one left. All I could do was focus on the life growing inside me, nourish my pregnancy, run the company, drive the car he'd left me, and endure the endless silence that followed Jason's absence. I told our mutual friends, "You don't have to send me updates anymore. I've moved on." What I didn't tell them was that Jason had personally sent me a wedding invitation. On the phone, he'd said, "Annabelle, we're still friends even after the divorce. You want me to be happy, don't you?" When I didn't respond, Chloe's voice came through, soft and tearful. "Ms. Carter, are you still upset with me?" "Jason, is this my fault? I shouldn't have taken you away from Ms. Carter." Strangely, it was Chloe's tears that lit the fuse. Jason suddenly sounded irritated. "Annabelle, do we really have to make this so tense? Even if we're not married anymore, we were together for so many years. We can still be friends." I almost laughed. I'd held my tongue before because the house, the money, the assets were already settled. But just because I wasn't angry didn't mean I was a fool. Still, Annabelle had always been gentle. I never argued. And I didn't now either. I smiled lightly. "Friends? Of course we're friends. I originally couldn't make it that day, but since you're both so eager to have me there, I'll send a gift." They sounded relieved immediately. "Annabelle, I knew you weren't petty." I didn't bother listening to anything else. I hung up and blocked the number. The doctor had warned me, too much stress wasn't good for the baby. Later, I heard from someone that on the wedding day, the groom seemed distracted. He kept glancing toward the entrance, as if waiting for someone. He waited and waited. No one showed. But during the live stream, watched by thousands, a delivery arrived, 99 funeral wreaths, sent by his ex-wife. The banner on one side read, "Wishing you lifelong infertility." The other read, "May your family line flourish for generations." Chapter 7. What did any of that have to do with me? 7 years had passed. I had kept my word. I had truly let go. I cut off every possible source of news about Jason. I just hadn't expected to run into him again at an art exhibition in City A. At the time, I was there with my child, strolling through the gallery. A daughter. Fair-skinned, quiet, rarely cried. I called her Sophie. She didn't cry, but she did fight. The moment other kids called her a fatherless brat, she'd beat them until they burst into tears. When I confronted their parents, they didn't back down. "Did my kids say anything wrong?" one of them shot back. "Your own husband didn't even want you. Of course your child has no father." I kept my tone calm. "Let's talk this through. There's no need to argue." She shot back immediately, "A kid raised by a single mother, no father, no manners." I stayed polite. "Could you not use that kind of language?" But I'd already heard about her background. Her husband was a mid-level executive at a well-known company. Their son had caused trouble more than once. Once he'd nearly injured another child's eye, and every time, the situation had been quietly smoothed over. Someone like that wasn't going to be afraid now. Sure enough, she jabbed a finger so close it nearly hit my face, spitting as she talked. "I'll say whatever I want. Who do you think you are? Just wait till my husband gets here. You'll regret this. And with a face like yours, who knows what your daughter will grow up to be." I fell silent for a moment, then sighed and called my assistant. Half an hour later, the same woman who had been so arrogant stood in front of me, her face drained of color, pleading through tears. Begging me not to fire her husband. Holding my daughter in my arms, I said helplessly, "I told you we could handle this calmly. Why wouldn't you listen? This is your husband, right? Come in. Don't just stand there." The man I paid a seven-figure salary had actually dared to show up and cause trouble in front of me. When he first pushed the door open, he still looked aggressive, ready to demand that the principal expel us. "You let in a widow's kid? Aren't you worried about the bad luck?" Then he turned, saw me sitting there, and his legs nearly gave out. Recognition hit. His voice shook. "Ms. Carter." He'd finally remembered. The rarely seen boss of his company, the one who almost never appeared in person, was also a widowed woman raising a daughter alone. Chapter 8. That's right. After divorcing Jason, I told the outside world that my husband had died. He dropped to his knees almost instantly, before his wife even realized what was happening. "Ms. Carter?" "What, Ms. Carter?" A bad feeling flickered across her face as she looked toward me. I took a sip of tea before finally meeting their eyes. I had no idea Manager Brooks and his wife both had such fiery tempers. Kevin knew exactly what kind of mouth his wife had. The two of them were more alike than different. Cold sweat beaded on his forehead. "Ms. Carter, this is a misunderstanding." He yanked his wife forward. The woman who'd been so domineering moments ago had gone pale, her sharp tongue suddenly stumbling. "Why yes, a misunderstanding." She forced a stiff smile and pulled her son closer. "Kids don't know any better. He was just talking nonsense." Kevin shot his son a glare. "Apologize. Now." Even a spoiled little tyrant was still a child. Faced with an adult's fury, he quickly broke down and mumbled an apology through tears. My daughter turned her head away with a small huff and said nothing. Kevin forced a laugh. "It's good he knows he was wrong. Ms. Carter is famous for her patience, she never argues or holds grudges. Don't worry, Ms. Carter. I'll make sure to discipline him properly when we get home." To be fair, Kevin did understand me. I rarely argued. I kept my tone even, my words measured, just like now. I nodded, satisfied. "It's good if you're willing to teach your child properly," I said calmly. "Every single mother deserves respect. And in this situation, the adults bear far more responsibility than the children." I set the teacup down on the table. When Kevin forced a smile, I smiled back, warm, reassuring, every bit the considerate employer. "As far as I know," I said gently, "tuition here runs around $15,000 a semester. I'm sure a capable man like you will land on his feet elsewhere. You'll be able to afford it, won't you?" Kevin's smile froze. Behind him, his wife's desperate pleas and their child's crying tangled into a chaotic chorus. By then I was already turning away, Annabelle, my daughter in my arms. A message popped up on my phone from my assistant. "Ms. Carter, per your instructions, Kevin's resignation process is nearly complete." I replied without expression. "Make sure he receives the proper severance. But in this industry, he's done." The response came back instantly, "Understood." I've always been an easygoing person. Once I realized that arguing solves nothing, I stopped wasting time on it altogether. Better to cut cleanly. When I discovered Jason had fallen for someone else, I divorced him and walked away with the assets. When I ran into people who refused to be reasonable, I fired them and made sure they couldn't find work in the same field again. And when my father kept gambling and expected me to cover his debts, I cut off all contact. Not a cent. One early morning, I simply received the news that he'd been found dead in a garbage lot. In the car, my daughter buried her face against my neck. The words those people had said still weighed on her. She whispered softly, "Mommy, don't be scared. Even without a dad, Sophie can protect you. Sophie will marry Mommy." That little menace. Completely upside down. I gave her a light swat on the backside, and she finally settled down. Chapter 9. Now, at the art exhibition I'd brought her to for a change of mood, a stunned voice sounded behind me. "Annabelle." I turned. Jason stood there, no longer the confident, high-spirited man I remembered. Back then, we'd ridden the wave of a booming market. Starting a business had always meant risk and reward in equal measure. But the landscape had settled since then. Starting over now was far from easy. He'd lost weight. The sharpness and arrogance in his features had faded, though he was still dressed in a suit. A suit with faint wrinkles that hadn't been fully pressed out. Chloe stood beside him in a long dress. "What are you doing here?" I asked, puzzled. As far as I remembered, this exhibition was invitation only. You couldn't get in without one. Jason seemed not to hear the question. Instead, he smiled, relief plain on his face. "I've wanted to reach out to you all these years, Annabelle. Seeing that you're doing okay. I'm relieved. What could possibly have happened to me? Annabelle, have you been doing well these past few years? He asked carefully. I almost forgot. After taking control of the company, I'd kept a low profile while I was pregnant. I stepped back from public appearances. I still ran everything behind the scenes, but on paper, the company had a different chairman. Jason had probably assumed that without him, I'd failed to keep things afloat and sold the company off. I didn't explain. I simply nodded. I'm doing well. Then, out of courtesy, I asked, what about you? Jason looked like he was about to answer, but Chloe tightened her grip on his arm and spoke first. We're doing very well too. Thank you for your concern, Ms. Carter. But when it comes to a married man, maybe it's best not to ask so many personal questions. The defensiveness was obvious, almost painfully so. In a setting like this, it didn't come across as protective. Just small. Strange, really. When she'd been exchanging glances with Jason back then, she hadn't seemed to mind that he was already a married man. If this had been before, Jason would have found it cute. He'd always liked it when the woman he loved got jealous over him. But now, he frowned. Annabelle and I are just catching up. Why are you making this into something? The impatience in his eyes was nothing like the warmth he used to show her. Chloe's face stiffened. She was an easy person to read. Fresh out of school, she'd had Jason protecting her, guiding her. Later, she'd gotten what she wanted and married the man she loved. Someone like that might seem innocent on the surface, but their pride ran deep. Now Jason was embarrassing her in public, and because of me. Her expression darkened exactly as expected. More pitifully, she only knew one way to respond. Sure enough, her eyes reddened in the next second. She bit her lip, stubborn, wounded. So you still think I'm not good enough, she said. I'm not as capable as she is, not as put together, and you. And you said that even so, I'd always come first in your heart. She didn't get to finish. The man who once spoke to her for hours on the phone, who had once loved her so intensely, didn't even have the patience to let her complete a sentence now. He cut in bluntly. If you know you don't measure up, why bring it up? Chloe fell silent. So did I. I offered a polite smile and stepped back. Since this is a personal matter between the two of you, I won't intrude. In my mind, I was already planning to have security review how irrelevant guests had managed to get in. But this perfect couple clearly had no intention of letting me leave so easily. With her pride wounded, Chloe finally broke. Tears streamed down the face that had once captivated Jason. So this is what you really think, she cried. You liar. You said you loved me most. Have you forgotten what you promised me? She clung to him, crying, refusing to let go. It looked like a young wife throwing a tantrum at her husband, except this was a formal event. No one found it charming. Several irritated glances were already turning our way. Jason had always been the one people flattered, the center of attention. He'd never been humiliated like this before. He clenched his jaw. Can you stop embarrassing yourself? God knew how he'd ever found this woman adorable in the first place. He'd come to realize something over the past few years. If you were going to marry, you married a woman like Annabelle, steady, composed, capable of standing beside you in public. The other kind, the kind you kept outside, not on display. It was a lesson he'd learned too late. Every time he thought about how he'd insisted on divorcing Annabelle for the sake of some so-called honest, above-board love, only to marry this woman instead, he felt a fresh wave of regret. Jason was too busy drowning in that bitterness to notice the way Chloe had gone still at his words. His eyes were fixed on me now, as if he wanted to say something. And that was when a small voice cut in. Mommy, who are they? Chapter 10. The air, already tense, went completely still. Only then did the two of them seem to notice Sophie, whose hand I'd been holding all along. She had watched the entire spectacle quietly, her expression unreadable. There was none of the innocence or confusion children her age usually carried. A child? Jason's voice trembled. His gaze locked onto Sophie's face, there was no denying the faint resemblance. Annabelle, this child is. He didn't want to assume, but the likeness was there. Even without my confirmation, a wild hope flickered across his face. Chloe, on the other hand, reacted as if something inside her had finally shattered. A child? You secretly had a child, she shrieked. You're trying to use the kid to take Jason back, aren't you? You ran his company into the ground and burned through his money, and now you're showing up with a child so he'll support you again. You're shameless. You're the homewrecker. The words poured out of her, louder and louder. As if she'd finally found a target for all her resentment, she spat out everything she'd been holding back. Just wait. Jason's here to close a deal with the owner of this gallery today. Once that's done, you won't get anywhere near him again. I knew it. How else would a woman like you suddenly show up at an event like this? Do you even belong here? Do you have any idea? Jason and I were about to fix things. Once this deal goes through, we'll have money again, we can go back to how things were. But Annabelle, why? Why is it you? Why did you show up again? She turned, hysterical. Security. Where's security? How did you let someone like this into an event like this? When the guards approached, she straightened immediately, chin lifted. Well? What are you waiting for? She demanded, pointing at Sophie and me. Throw them out. If your boss finds out you let people like this in and lowered the standard of this place, you'll be the ones paying for it. The guards exchanged confused looks at me. The gallery owner? That would be me. My assistant had mentioned that a small business owner had been asking for a meeting for months, and that I'd finally agreed to see him today. So that was Jason. Chapter 11. Chloe seemed to regain some of her composure, slipping back into the arrogance of someone who believed she had already won. You're chasing after someone else's husband all the way here, she sneered. Don't forget, it was you who insisted on cutting him off back then. You were the one who blocked him and said you never wanted to see him again. What? Regretting it now? Chloe sneered. You had that bastard child just so you could use it to take Jason back from me, didn't you? The words were so vicious I immediately covered Sophie's ears. Thank God she hadn't heard. If she ever found out someone had called her that, said she was born just to help me chase after a piece of trash, it would be chaos. It would take forever to calm her down. Enough. Stop talking. Chloe's outburst had already drawn attention from the surrounding guests. Jason suddenly stepped in front of me the way he used to when we were young, glaring at Chloe with open disgust. Annabelle just loves me too much, he snapped. And she was my wife first. That child is my blood. What right do you have to say anything? Don't forget how you seduced me into divorcing her in the first place. The crowd erupted. 5 years. The two people who had once defied everything for love were now tearing each other apart in public, ripping open old wounds. Jason accused Chloe of luring him into abandoning his family. Chloe screamed hysterically, demanding security drag me out. Meanwhile, a guard approached me carefully, his voice respectful. Anna, these two do have valid invitations. We didn't expect things to escalate like this. Anna. Jason and Chloe both stared at me, disbelief written all over their faces. I hadn't mentioned it. Anna was my artist name and the primary organizer of this exhibition. Which meant the invitation they'd worked so hard to obtain, the person they'd come hoping to meet and secure a partnership with, was me. Chapter 12. Thinking about it now, maybe we should have double-checked the invitations more carefully, the security guard continued apologetically. The invitations are fine, I said. This isn't your fault. It's my oversight. I'd been busy lately, taking Sophie out, helping her unwind. My new assistant didn't know anything about my personal history. So when he mentioned a promising project, said the potential partner looked solid, worth meeting, I'd agreed without asking too many questions. That was how this absurd encounter had happened. Honestly, the moment Jason had insisted on divorcing me for the sake of his grand, honest love, walking away from everything just to give Chloe a proper title, I'd already known life wouldn't go easy on him afterward. He'd been so confident. He believed that since he'd once built everything from nothing, climbed to the top without relying on anyone, he could do it all again. What he forgot was that when the wind is at your back, even a pig can fly. You don't get that kind of luck twice. But even so, I hadn't expected Jason to fall this far. All these years later, and he was still circling at the bottom. No, that's impossible, he muttered, staring at me. How could she be Anna? Chloe was the first to snap out of it. She shook her head, rejecting the idea outright. She's a fraud who only got anywhere because of a man. Without Jason, she would have crashed and burned. The company would be gone, and she'd be nothing. There's no way she's Anna. In truth, she just couldn't accept that the person standing in front of her was me. She didn't want to admit she'd misjudged me back then, that while she was struggling, I was still thriving. Her own failure stung, but my success kept her up at night. Anna, one of the guards asked, turning to me, how would you like us to handle them? Jason, meanwhile, had gone from stunned to ecstatic. Annabelle, I knew you wouldn't sell the company we built together. Let's talk. With my plan, we can take it even further. We can start again, like before. We'll fight side by side. For the first time, I felt genuine revulsion. Remove them. The security team, all tall and built, had clearly been waiting for a chance to prove their worth. At my word, each of them grabbed one person and, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, dragged Jason and Chloe out like unwanted strays. Whispers spread through the onlookers. Isn't that Jason? He used to be a big name in City B, what happened to him? I heard he divorced his wife for an intern. Thought he was some kind of legend. Turns out without his original partner, he's nothing. Jason cared deeply about his pride. Today was, without question, the most humiliating day of his life. And every word reached him, clear as day. Even during the scrappy early days of starting his business, no one had treated him like this. Let alone at the height of his success. But everything had changed. When had it started? As he hit the ground outside, he suddenly turned, his gaze dark, landing on Chloe. Chapter 13. Chloe was still cursing me under her breath. She refused to believe that I could be doing so well without Jason, better than ever, even. And as for her, she hadn't become the wealthy wife she'd imagined. Instead, she and Jason had turned into strangers bound by resentment. Jason didn't bother with her. He didn't even look at her. He headed toward the back exit of the gallery. Then he saw Sophie being led out by one of the attendants. A flicker of warmth passed through his eyes. He patted his pockets, searching, until he finally found a piece of candy tucked into the corner. Chloe had put it there. Back when she was still an intern, when things between them were ambiguous, she used to slip a candy into his bag every day. When Jason discovered it, he'd laughed. What is this, trying to bribe a kid? She'd stuck out her tongue, bright-eyed. You work so hard. A little sweetness every day might make you happier. I'd never done things like that. When I had time, I cooked him proper meals, but I'd never thought of small gestures like this. Jason had found it refreshing. Later, he divorced me and married Chloe. At first, everything unfolded exactly as he'd imagined. Even though I blocked him and cut off contact, he and Chloe were happy together. The girlish sweetness once delighted him. But little by little, the smooth entrepreneurial path he'd imagined turned rough and unforgiving. He ran around all day, finally managed to bring home some money, only to find his card had been maxed out the moment he stepped inside. The culprit twirled in front of him, proudly showing off a new dress. Honey, look. Isn't it pretty? He stared at her in silence. They had a huge fight. And that was the beginning. From then on, conflicts never stopped. The innocence he once adored began to look like foolishness. The playful charm turned into affectation. The jealousy and possessiveness he'd once found flattering became petty, embarrassing, and exhausting. As for that piece of candy, he didn't even remember when it had been slipped into his pocket and forgotten there. But it didn't matter. As his daughter, she would understand his feelings. She wouldn't mind. Sophie? Your name is Sophie, right? He stepped in front of the girl, putting on what he believed was a warm, approachable smile. I'm your dad. Chapter 14. Sophie looked up at him. There was none of the innocent softness one might expect from a child on her face. Instead, she stared at him like he was a lunatic. Mister, why are you swearing at people? Jason froze. The bodyguards were already moving, ready to push him away. He hurried to explain. Sophie, I really am your father. Your mom and I had a misunderstanding. She was angry, that's all. But that doesn't matter anymore. Now that I know you exist, I understand, your mom still has feelings for me. Otherwise, she wouldn't have given birth to you. Sophie, don't you want to make your mom happy? Dad can take you out, we'll prepare a surprise for her together, okay? He wasn't an unattractive man. Even in decline, he still carried a certain persuasive charm. Especially to a 6-year-old child. Sure enough, Sophie tilted her head. Really? Of course it's true. Sophie, Dad loves you. Jason reached out his hand, smiling warmly. Sophie smiled too. The next second, the smile vanished. Her mouth flattened, and she stared at him with a blank expression, then said in her soft, childish voice to the bodyguard beside her. Eat him up. Jason froze. The bodyguard raised his hand. Jason flinched. He was knocked to the ground, struggling. Sophie, I'm your dad. I'm your real father. So you're the one who made mom sad, right? I don't believe you. You're a bad guy. There's a misunderstanding. Jason tried to explain. Dad was tricked too. And your mom's just upset. She must have said a lot of bad things about me, but it's okay, I don't blame her. I'll make it up to both of you. He hadn't finished speaking when Sophie lowered her gaze to him and said calmly, Mister, you don't actually think mom told me nothing, do you? In Jason's subconscious, he'd always assumed that for the child's sake, I would avoid the topic entirely, that I would never speak of him at all. That gave him plenty of room to make amends, starting with the child. As long as Sophie liked him, then for her sake, I would eventually have to try to accept him too. But what he didn't expect was the easily fooled little girl he imagined snorting and saying, Mom already told me about you when I first asked where my dad was. You're a bad guy. You chose that awful woman over mom, so I'm going to help mom deal with you. He had assumed too much. I had never tried to soften his image or avoid the subject. I wasn't the one in the wrong. Sophie had the right to know the truth. Rather than dodge the topic, it was better to be honest from the start, so Jason would never have the chance to manipulate her later. Jason still refused to give up. Don't you miss your dad at all? Sophie pulled a face. Mom gave birth to me. Mom goes to all my parent meetings. Mom taught me how to talk and walk. Why would I stab her in the back for some stranger? The little rascal had clearly picked up new slang from secretly playing with her phone. She lifted her chin proudly. That beating? I did it for mom. Jason had been hit hard. By the time Sophie came back, she slipped her hand naturally into mine. I looked down at her. Weren't you going to the restroom? Why were you gone so long? Her big eyes filled with innocent sincerity. She clutched her stomach and frowned. I had diarrhea, mommy. Carry me. I didn't question it. I lifted her into my arms. I didn't see the small smile she hid as she buried her face into my shoulder. Chapter 15. After I finally got her to sleep, I had time to deal with what remained unfinished. Rubbing my temples, I asked, Did you have people follow him like I said? My assistant nodded. They did. After he learned your identity, he went straight to the company asking to see you. I said flatly, Throw him out. And not just that, spread the word. Any company that signs Jason is choosing to give up working with us. Anyone who dares to hire him is picking a fight with me, Annabelle. If people really can't stand me, then I don't mind taking them all on. And when that happens, don't say I didn't give anyone fair warning. The words came out decisive and final, leaving no room for negotiation. My assistant froze for a second, not hesitating, just surprised. Ms. Carter, you're planning to shut him down completely? If I don't, what's the point of letting them walk away unscathed? I said evenly. He cheated, and she knew exactly what she was doing. If I don't deal with it while they're down, am I supposed to wait for them to recover and live happily ever after? I just don't like arguing with people. That doesn't mean I don't hold grudges. Back then, when Jason cheated behind my back, I took every asset he had and left him with nothing. That was already mercy enough. As for Chloe, all she did was take an unfaithful man. She wasn't even worth my revenge. But they should never have shown up in front of me again, one trying to take my daughter, the other calling her a bastard. And in front of everyone. If I didn't teach them a lesson after that, how was I supposed to survive in this city going forward? They probably never realized that what feels like a small warning from someone in power can be devastating for the people beneath them. Some debts are meant to be repaid sooner or later. Chapter 16. My assistant moved quickly. After years of steady footing in City A, I'd built enough standing in the business circle that people would think twice before crossing me. No one in their right mind would offend me just to help a middle-aged man trying to start over. So Jason ran into walls everywhere he went. Doors closed. Meetings ended cold. Faces turned away. Chloe, meanwhile, seemed rattled after that day. She watched Jason obsessively, and every time he came home empty-handed, resentment spilled over. Weren't you supposed to be capable? How can you not even measure up to Annabelle? On social media, she still kept up the appearance of a glamorous life, attracting followers who envied her for marrying into wealth. For years, that illusion had fed her vanity. But lies always come apart in the end. If Jason couldn't rise again, her designer knockoffs and stage displays of happiness would eventually be exposed. Annabelle? You think you're even qualified to say her name? Jason sneered inside their cramped rental, his eyes full of contempt. When Annabelle and I were building the company together, she was competent, reliable. And you? All you ever did was wait to enjoy what someone else earned. Chloe, if you hadn't seduced me back then, why would I have divorced Annabelle and torn my own family apart? I seduced you? Chloe dropped the act, laughing bitterly. Did I force you to cheat? Force you to divorce and beat with me? You were the one eating from one bowl while eyeing another. And now you're pretending to be innocent? I'm telling you, don't even think about going back to her. If you try, I won't let you get away with it. The threat was obvious. But Jason never took her seriously. Back when she still wore that sweet, innocent mask, even her threats felt harmless to him. Now, he was clinging to me like a lifeline. Because after being beaten and humiliated, he'd realized Sophie was heavily protected. He couldn't even get close to her. Eventually, at yet another cafe meeting, his proposal was torn apart by the manager across from him, dismissed line by line as worthless. As the man stood to leave, he cast Jason a contemptuous glance. You think something like this deserves Ms. Carter's personal attention? Leave it on the street and even a dog wouldn't pick it up. That wasn't entirely fair. Jason did have ability. But the project required funding far beyond what ordinary firms could handle. To them, it sounded like pure fantasy. The manager had barely walked away when Jason spotted me stepping out of a hotel across the street. He forgot everything else and rushed forward. My bodyguards stopped him halfway. Annabelle. Was this you? Was it all you? Do you hate me that much? I'm Sophie's father. What good does it do you if I end up with nothing? I met his eyes, calm and unmoved. It makes me happy. I spoke almost immediately. When he froze, I curled my lips into a faint smile. You're miserable, and that makes me happy. Isn't that how it usually goes after a divorce? Jason, what makes you think I'd be that generous? That I'd just swallow the loss and suffer in silence? He looked unwilling to give up. I can change, Annabelle. I know I was wrong. This project really matters to me. If it fails again, I won't survive. I straightened at once, genuinely intrigued. There's a benefit like that? Now that's good news. He fell silent. Chapter 17. Jason finally accepted the truth. I no longer loved him. Which made all his posturing pointless. Cornered, the trapped beast finally showed its fangs. He ground his teeth. Are you really going to be this ruthless? I shook my head. No. Hope flickered across his face. Then I added, I could be far more ruthless. This is nothing. Anger surged through him. You weren't like this before. He hadn't cheated before either. But he'd always been harsh with others and lenient with himself, as if I were the one in the wrong. No matter what, I'm still Sophie's biological father. You're being this cold, aren't you afraid she'll resent you when she grows up? I asked calmly, do you really want Sophie to acknowledge you as her father? Of course. I am her father. Fine. Then let's do this properly. From daily living expenses to school tuition and extracurriculars, Sophie's costs start at around $100,000 a year. Since you're so eager to claim the title, you can start by paying the child support you owe for these past years. Not much. Just a few $100,000. The words died in Jason's throat. Chapter 18. Jason left in a fury. Before walking away, he threw back, Annabelle, you pushed me into this first. Don't regret it. Every word made him sound like the wronged party. Anyone listening might have mistaken him for a gentleman. How had I never noticed how good he was at pretending? My assistant looked uneasy. Ms. Carter, if you push him this far, what if he does something extreme? I watched his retreating figure without emotion. People only show you who they really are when they're backed into a corner. Chapter 19. That same night, Chloe's blog, silent for nearly a year, suddenly updated with a photo of her and Jason looking affectionate together. The dormant account came alive instantly, fans flooding back in. Mom, the couple I ship is finally alive again. So sweet. It's like a surprise epilogue update after a romance novel ends. Who's been spreading rumors that Chloe's marriage is miserable and that she's just pretending to be rich? They're clearly in love, okay? Under that comment, Chloe left her only reply, there were some unexpected bumps along the way, but it's fine. Jason loves me. He's not someone anyone can steal away with schemes and tricks. We're very happy. Her response triggered endless speculation. The most liked reply read, "Don't tell me that old hag is stirring trouble again? Trying to steal someone else's husband for life, huh?" Chloe neither replied nor deleted it. The account's popularity surged again. On the third day, Jason walked into the headquarters of my competitor. At that moment, my assistant knocked on my office door. "Ms. Carter, these are the materials for the upcoming bid." I skimmed a couple of pages, then looked up. "By the way, has Kevin's resignation been finalized?" The assistant nodded. "He tried to make a scene at first, but yesterday something changed. He suddenly agreed, took the compensation, cleared out his desk, and said he'd found another job. In a city, though, aside from the company across the street, who else would dare take him?" Given the competitive relationship, they had no reason to heed my warning, or fear offending me. I nodded, understanding. Chapter 20. The next day, 1 hour before the bidding gala, Chloe's account suddenly posted a video. In it, she wore a white dress and deliberately tired makeup, looking fragile and pitiful. I've always tried not to worry my followers, and I never wanted to start a cyberbullying storm against anyone. But this time, I really have no choice. She lifted her head, eyes glistening as she faced the camera. "Annabelle, I know you're watching. And I know you've never accepted that Jason chose me over you back then. Whether you hate me or resent Jason, we don't care. But you crossed a line when you secretly had a child and tried to use that child as leverage. The child is not a tool for fighting over a man. Jason and I would never be that heartless. You thought having a child would make him leave me and come back to you, but he won't. On the contrary, we're prepared to file for custody. No matter what kind of mother you are, Jason is still the child's biological father. And I will treat that child as my own." The speech painted her as helpless yet righteous. Public opinion exploded. My identity and background were dug up within hours. "Annabelle uses a child to force marriage. Annabelle, the mistress." Both hashtags shot straight to #1 and #2 on the trending list. Chloe's fans led the charge. "Lady, stop embarrassing yourself. They're a loving couple, who do you think you are? The child is innocent. Using a kid as leverage is disgusting. Can't believe the evil side character dragging a child into it to break up the main couple actually exists." As the backlash escalated, my assistant came to ask what to do. It wasn't that we couldn't handle it. The problem was different. Miss Sophie saw the comments and is already demanding to argue with them online. That child had always had a fiery temper. I waved a hand. "Take her to play some games for now. As for everything else, we'll deal with it after the bidding is over." Chapter 21. This round of bidding moved unusually fast. Just as I walked in, I ran into Jason. He clearly knew the public storm better than anyone, and for a moment, he even looked uneasy. "Annabelle, don't blame me. You forced my hand first." Behind him, the CEO of the rival company beamed, his face flushed with smug satisfaction. "If you ask me, Ms. Carter, a woman should stay home, have kids, cook, and take care of the family. Look at you now. Couldn't keep your husband, couldn't keep your people either." Kevin, now working for them, chimed in immediately. "Exactly, Ms. Carter. Don't blame me for not warning you as a former employee. Instead of competing with a room full of men, maybe you should deal with those unflattering rumors first." I curved my lips into a polite smile. "Kevin. Oh. Regretting letting me go, Ms. Carter," he sneered. "Not at all," I replied gently. "I just wanted to remind you of something." I glanced at his new boss, but my words were clearly meant for Kevin. "I hear your company hasn't been doing so well. Desperate for a major contract to stay afloat. And yet you rushed to join them anyway. Be careful. You might end up struggling to pay your kids' tuition. And one more thing." This time, I turned directly to the CEO. "Your wife left you and took the kids with her. Now your finances are slipping too. Be careful not to misjudge the situation and lose everything for good." His wife came from a powerful family herself. After watching him fail again and again, she had taken the children and gone back to her parents. Hardly shocking. Compared to him, I was still a rookie in this particular arena. After all, I had never fallen that far. The moment my words landed, his expression darkened. He ground his teeth. "Ms. Carter, you should leave yourself some room. Burn every bridge, and you'll regret it later." I looked down at him, let out a faint, amused laugh. "I'll be waiting." As for Jason, He wasn't even worth a single word from me anymore. Not even a glance. Chapter 22. As expected, the proposal they submitted was a revised version of the plan Jason had written. On the surface, it looked solid. But only on the surface. With so many companies present, none of them were amateurs. No one was that much worse than the others. Of course, that would have been true if their proposal hadn't been stitched together with pieces from our own bidding plan. How is that possible? My assistant blurted, stunned. Then realization hit, and she instinctively turned toward Kevin. It was you. You stole the proposal. Kevin smiled smugly. Careful. That sounds like defamation. With the leak, and with the recent scandal surrounding our lead, the outcome was almost inevitable. Their company secured the qualification. Up on the stage, Jason stood tall, the confidence he'd once had finally returning after years. For a moment, he looked like the man he used to be. I watched him bask in that brief glory for a few seconds, then turned away. Let's go. Chapter 23. The first thing I did was release the photos and evidence from when Jason was still married, back when he and Chloe had been flirting behind the scenes. I tagged Chloe's account and added a single line beneath it. I've always wondered, what exactly did it mean when you were playfully pinching my husband's face back then? As for the child, I found out about her after the divorce. I'm fully capable of raising her on my own. I certainly don't need to go looking for a useless father years later. The records also showed that Jason had diverted marital assets to buy Chloe an apartment. The reason the evidence was so thorough was simple. When I first noticed signs that he might be cheating, I hired a private investigator to look into it. My original plan was straightforward. If he did cheat, I wanted airtight proof so I could secure the majority of our shared assets and send him packing. What I hadn't expected was that I wouldn't even get the chance to use it. Jason rushed ahead on his own. In a dramatic burst of self-declared true love, he handed over the house, the car, the money, everything, and walked away with nothing but a signed divorce certificate. I was genuinely stunned by how recklessly stupid that move was. Then I signed the papers without hesitation, afraid he might change his mind. At best, I had expected to walk away with 2/3 of the assets. Who knew I'd get an unexpected bonus? The evidence I never needed back then had finally found its purpose. And it was ironclad. Shortly after, our legal department released a formal statement. The public narrative flipped almost overnight. The same people who had called me a homewrecker and a bitter ex suddenly felt duped. So the sweet romance turned out to be a cheating husband and his mistress. Nice plot twist. So what exactly was the innocent explanation for playfully pinching a married man's face? Dying to know. Cheater and mistress deserve each other. Let them both disappear. For once, Chloe didn't respond. She stayed silent. Partly because the evidence left her nothing to argue. Partly because she had always known this day would come. Letting me carry the negative headlines for a few hours had already served her purpose. Jason's proposal was approved. They won the bid. Money poured in. Gradually, he regained the confidence and visibility he once had. Chloe, by extension, finally stepped into the life she had always dreamed of: designer labels, luxury addresses, high society parties. That day, she even called me, her voice cool and triumphant. Annabelle, you don't actually think you won, do you? It was just an account. I don't need it. Now that Jason has money again, there's nothing we can't do. I was holding Sophie, about to board a flight for an overseas vacation. I gave a soft, genuine vow. Then I wish you two a lifetime of happiness. May you stay locked together forever. Right before takeoff, I made one final call. The voice on the other end answered respectfully. Ms. Carter. Looking out at the runway stretching beneath the sky, I spoke lightly. It's getting cold. I suppose it's time for Vaughn Group to go bankrupt. Chapter 24. The very next day, the project that had been thriving suddenly shifted direction. Hidden debts within the bidding company surfaced. The largest investor, sensing trouble, pulled out immediately and vanished. With no choice, Vaughn Group had to pour their own capital into plugging the widening financial gaps. After all, this project was their only lifeline. But the hole was bottomless. Half a month. Just 15 days. Vaughn Group, already teetering on the edge, finally collapsed and declared bankruptcy. The peak Jason thought he was about to reach shattered once again, falling harder than before. This time, there was no coming back. The day I returned from vacation, I asked Sophie on the way, "Do you ever feel sad that I couldn't give you a father's love?" She blinked up at me with wide eyes. "Mom gives me all the love. And besides, Mom gives Sophie lots and lots of money. How could I be missing anything?" I laughed. "That's money, not love." She nodded seriously, sounding far older than her years. "If you have lots and lots of money, you'll have lots and lots of love. Sophie will love Mom a lot too. When I grow up, I'll make lots and lots of money for you." That answer reassured me more than I expected. After dropping her off at school, I headed to the office, only to be nearly blocked at the entrance by Jason and Chloe. Chloe looked genuinely worn down now, her eyes fixed on me with raw hatred. "It's all your fault. All of it. You planned everything. You ruined me." I raised a brow, calm. "I didn't do anything. How exactly did I ruin you?" She didn't seem to hear a word. She was already unraveling. "Now we have nothing. Nothing left. Are you satisfied? I'm not spending my life with a useless man." But their scandals had spread across the internet long ago. Even if she tried to find a respectable job now, who would take her? Jason, drowning in debt, had only one thing left in mind, clinging to me, using Sophie as leverage. "Annabelle, I'm Sophie's biological father. You have to help me. Just this once." I did help him. I called the police. The charge, public disturbance and harassment. They arrived quickly and took both Jason and Chloe away. We probably won't see them again. Their photos have already been circulated through the company's internal security system, clearly labeled, "Barred from entry." At first, the notice read, "Dogs and these two individuals are not allowed inside." Employees protested the comparison as unfair to animals, so the word "dogs" was removed. Only their names remained, permanently blacklisted. From then on, things only went downhill for them. At this point, my love life is a public service announcement. Free of charge.